I've always believed that the most valuable thing in this world is land. Not money, not stocks, not even people. Land never cheats. Give it water, sunshine, and a little attention, and it will pay you back 100-fold. I learned this lesson as a boy when my grandfather gave me a tiny plot in his vegetable garden for my first experiments with radishes. My son, Kenneth, never realized this simple truth. I met Edith on a cold October evening in 1984. I was 23, she was 21. I had just graduated from the state university with a degree in agronomic engineering and had taken a job with Agro Systems, the largest agricultural company in New Iberia. Edith worked as a bookkeeper in the same building, and every day I'd see her in the cafeteria. She always had chicken salad and apple juice. I'd never been quick with my tongue, so it took me 3 months to work up the courage to talk to her. "It's going to rain," I said, looking up at the sky outside the office. "Can I give you a ride?" She laughed. "Orson, I live 2 blocks away. You know that. I didn't." And I was amazed that she knew my name. "I saw your ID," Edith explained, noticing my surprise. "You pass my desk every day when you go to the lab." That evening we did get caught in the rain. I walked her home, soaked to the skin, with a naughty umbrella that had been twisted by the wind. She invited me to tea. 9 months later we were married. Our house on Magnolia Avenue was small but cozy. 2 bedrooms, a living room with a fireplace, a kitchen where Edith experimented with baking recipes, and the main treasure, a 22-acre plot of land behind the house. Most of the neighbors had laid out lawns or pools there, but I'd turned every square foot into a garden. Not the usual ornamental garden, but a veritable outdoor laboratory. Kenneth was born in the cold winter of 1986. It was a difficult birth, and the doctor said there would be no more children. Edith cried for weeks, and I was heartbroken, but tried not to show it. We put all the love we could give Kenneth, maybe even too much. My salary was modest in the early years, but gradually I worked my way up the ladder. By 35, I was head of the department developing new drought-tolerant corn hybrids. Every evening after work, I would come home and continue experimenting in my garden, applying new methods I had read about in scientific journals. Edith used to joke that she was jealous of my tomatoes. "You talk more gently to them than you do to me," she used to say, bringing me iced tea in the garden. Kenneth was a smart kid. In elementary school, teachers praised his math skills and sharp mind. I dreamed that someday he would join me in the lab, and together we would create new varieties that could feed millions. But the older he got, the clearer it was that my dreams would remain dreams. The first signs of trouble came when Kenneth turned 13. He began to feel ashamed of our house. "Why are we living in this doghouse?" he asked at dinner one night. "Harmon has a new house 3 times the size of ours, and they have a pool." "Harmon?" Edith frowned. "Is that Mr. Pratt's son? That lawyer?" "Yes, and they go to the Bahamas every summer." Kenneth pushed his plate of roast away. "We can't even go to Disneyland." "We went to Disneyland 2 years ago," I reminded him, "for 2 days, and we stayed in a cheap motel." Edith put her hand on my shoulder, feeling me tense up. "Kenneth, money isn't the most important thing in life. Your father is doing important work. He's helping to create crops that will feed people even in the driest years." "It doesn't matter if we can barely make ends meet," he muttered. "We're not scraping by," I said calmly. "We have everything we need. A roof over your head, food on the table, and you go to a good school. But not a private school like Harmon." Kenneth cut me off and walked away from the table. This conversation repeated itself in different variations throughout his teenage years. The older Kenneth got, the wider the gap between us grew. He wasn't interested in my work, avoided helping in the garden, and at family dinners he was engrossed in his phone, occasionally answering one-word answers. In high school, Kenneth became interested in economics and finance. He enrolled in every possible business course, joined the school's investor club, and spent hours reading financial news. I tried to support his interests, although deep down I felt that I was losing my son. "Can you believe that techno future stock went up 27% in one day?" he exclaimed one day at breakfast. "If we had money to invest, we could make a nice profit." "We have investments," I replied. "Your education, our house, retirement accounts." Kenneth rolled his eyes. "Dad, that's not an investment, that's a necessity. I'm talking about real money, opportunities. For a 16-year-old boy, you're too concerned with money," I pointed out. "And you're not concerned enough," he retorted. "Look at you. 20 years in the same company, and what do you have? An old house, a 10-year-old car, and a tomato patch." Edith intervened, trying as always to smooth the way. "Kenneth, everyone chooses his own path. Your father loves his work, and that's what makes him rich." "Yes, of course," Kenneth snorted. "Wealth that can't be cashed in." When Kenneth turned 17, something irreparable happened. Edith began complaining of headaches. At first, we put them down to stress and lack of sleep, but when the pains got worse and she became strangely forgetful, we went to the doctor. The diagnosis was out of the blue: glioblastoma, an aggressive brain tumor. The next 8 months became a nightmare of hospital corridors, chemotherapy, bills, and sleepless nights. I took time off work, worked remotely, did everything I could to be near Edith. Kenneth, on the other hand, Kenneth was immersed in his studies. He was studying for final exams and applying to colleges, spending hours in the library. "You could visit your mom more often," I told him after a particularly hard day at the hospital. "Why? To watch her die?" His voice was shaking. I can't see her like this. She asks about you. She misses you." "I'll write her a message." He turned back to the computer, which had the Princeton University page open on the screen. "A message?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Kenneth, your mother is dying and I'm what?" He turned abruptly. "What am I supposed to do? Drop out of school? Give up my future? She wouldn't want that." "She wants to see her son," I said quietly. "She still can." That night he did come with me to the hospital. He sat there for 15 minutes, awkwardly holding Edith's hand, and then ran away on the pretext of preparing for a test. I didn't insist anymore. Edith died in April when the first tulips were blooming in our garden. She always loved the yellow ones. In her last days, she had hardly regained consciousness, but when I brought the bouquet to her bedside, she smiled and squeezed my hand. Kenneth wasn't around. He was at a job interview in Princeton. At the funeral, he stood next to me, tall, thin, with reddened eyes but dry cheeks. He didn't cry. Not at the ceremony, not at home, not in the days that followed. Instead, he plunged with redoubled energy into preparing for exams and graduation. 2 months later, a letter of acceptance to Princeton came with a partial scholarship. Kenneth was thrilled. "This is my ticket to a new life," he said, waving the envelope. "This is where millionaires and corporate executives come from." "I'm proud of you," I replied, though part of me was heartbroken at the thought of him being so far away. "Mom would be proud too." His face twitched for a moment. "Yeah, I guess so." He lowered his eyes. "I wish she hadn't lived to see it. It was the only moment of vulnerability I saw." The next day, he was already making a list of things to buy for college and studying the campus plan. "I need a new laptop," he declared, "and a suit for presentations, and maybe a car. A lot of students have their own cars." "Kenneth, we can't afford a new car." I shook my head. "The scholarship only covers part of the tuition. We'd have to take out a loan anyway." "If you made more money, we wouldn't have to worry about loans," he muttered. I pretended not to hear. Since Edith's death, I'd learned to let a lot of Kenneth's barbs pass. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe we should have had a heart-to-heart talk, vented our pain and anger, tried to understand each other. But I didn't know how to start that conversation, and he clearly wasn't looking for intimacy. In August, I drove him to Princeton. We spent 6 hours in the car in almost complete silence, only occasionally commenting on the scenery outside the window or discussing where to stop for a bite to eat. When we arrived on campus, Kenneth was transformed. His eyes lit up, his shoulders squared. He eagerly absorbed the atmosphere of the prestigious university, greeting other freshmen, looking at the old buildings. I helped him check into his dorm, introduced him to his roommate, the son of a banker from Boston, and suggested we have dinner together. Actually, Kenneth faltered, there's a freshman meeting tonight and then a party. So, I see, I nodded. I guess I'll just drive back then. Yeah, that's better. He was clearly relieved. Thanks for the ride. We hugged awkwardly, and I headed for the exit. Dad, he called to me at the door. I'll make the call. He did. Once every 2 or 3 weeks, usually on Sundays, short conversations of 5 to 10 minutes, talked about school, new friends, frat parties, never asked how I was doing without Edith, what I was doing in an empty house, how my work was going. He didn't show up for Thanksgiving, said he was invited to the country house of a fellow student's parents. At Christmas, he spent 3 days at home, most of the time texting with friends or reviewing materials for a term paper. That's how the first year passed, followed by the second and third. The distance between us grew, despite regular but perfunctory phone calls. Kenneth was changing. His speech became more polished, his closet was filled with expensive clothes, gifts from new friends, as he explained. He took internships at investment companies, attended events for young entrepreneurs, and made ambitious plans. After graduation, they promised to take me to Goldman Sachs, he said during a rare visit home in his 4th year. The starting salary is $100,000 a year, plus bonuses. Impressive. I was genuinely proud of his accomplishments, though I didn't understand his world. You've always been driven. Unlike you, he replied with a barely perceptible chuckle. Still working on your cornrows? Actually, I was promoted to head of the research department. I tried not to react to his tone. We're developing new methods of increasing yields while minimizing the use of pesticides. Yeah, saving the world, he said. How much does it pay to save the world? Enough, I answered dryly. Not much, judging by this house. He glanced around the living room where nothing had changed since Edith died. You're 54 and you live like a student. I live as comfortably as I can, I countered. Money isn't the only measure of success, Kenneth. Only those who don't have it say that, he smiled, as if we were discussing a joke only he could understand. After graduation, Kenneth moved to New York. The calls became even less frequent, once every month or two. He actually got a job at a prestigious financial company, rented an apartment in a trendy neighborhood, and started dating the daughter of a media magnate. His life was a glittering picture of success, which he occasionally showed me through his phone screen during video calls. And I continued my measured life in New Iberia. Work, garden, occasional dinners with colleagues or neighbors. I had grown accustomed to solitude, although at times my longing for Edith would be so strong that it took my breath away. At such times I would go into the garden, dip my hands in the warm earth and talk to the plants, imagining that she was listening. In our rare conversations with Kenneth, I sensed a growing contempt on his part. He no longer tried to hide that he thought my life was a waste of potential and that I was a failure. Kenneth arrived on my 60th birthday. No warning, just showed up on my doorstep with a bottle of expensive whiskey and a gift box. I thought I'd check on the old man, he said with a strained smile. It's his anniversary. The gift box contained Cartier cufflinks. I never wore cufflinks, and I never wore shirts that required them either. But I thanked him and invited him inside. We sat in the living room sipping whiskey that was too smoky for my taste and tried to find topics of conversation. Kenneth told me about his promotion, about his plans to buy a penthouse, about investing in some promising startup. I listened, nodded, asked questions. Then it was my turn. The company is preparing layoffs, I said. There are rumors that our department might be cut. What are you going to do if you get fired? Kenneth asked, with a slight concern that I thought was an expression of concern. Get another job, I guess. Or take over the garden full time. I've always wanted to devote more time to experimenting with hybrids. Kenneth set the glass on the table with a loud clatter. Experimenting with hybrids? Really? You're 60, Dad. It's time to start thinking about retirement, about how to ensure a decent old age. I have retirement savings, I assured him. Not much, but enough for a modest life. Modest, he shook his head. All my life modest. Don't you get tired of it? I remained silent and he continued. You know what the saddest part is? You could have done better. You have education, experience. You could have started your own company, patented your designs, but instead you've been working for decades for a corporation for a pittance. I did what I love, I said. I've never regretted it. You should, he finished his whiskey in one gulp. Look at this house. Look at your life. You're wasting away, and you could have had a real life. Kenneth stayed with me that night. In the morning, at breakfast, he returned to the subject of my missing life. I listened in silence, realizing that no argument would convince him that my life had meaning and value by my own standards, not by the number of zeros in my bank account. Before he left, he gave me a dry, formal hug and said, "Consider moving to a nursing home if you do get fired. It will be safer and cheaper that way." I watched his expensive rental car drive off down the street and felt strangely relieved. In that moment, I realized that my son and I are strangers. We have different values, different ideas about life, and no bond of kinship can bridge that gap. Our next conversation took place 2 months later, on the phone. I told him that my fears were confirmed. I was downsized along with half of the research department. So what now? I could hear impatience in his voice. I haven't decided yet, I answered. The severance pay isn't bad and there's no hurry. Dad, you're 64 years old. What else is there to do at your age? Sell the house and move to something more appropriate for your situation. My situation? I don't get it. You're an unemployed senior citizen with minimal savings, Kenneth said. A poor father like you is a disgrace. I can't even tell my colleagues about your situation. It's humiliating. His words hit me like a slap in the face. All these years I had felt his growing contempt, but never had he expressed it so directly, so cruelly. I'm sorry to disappoint you, I said quietly and hung up. That night, I sat in the garden for a long time, looking up at the stars and thinking about Edith, about Kenneth, about my whole life. In the morning, I woke up with unexpected lightness. For the first time in years, I had no need to rush to work, to report to work, to follow corporate rules. I was free to do what I had always loved most, working with the earth, experimenting, creating. I went out to the garden with a cup of coffee and noticed a strange plant by the fence, a tomato bush with unusually large fruit that I hadn't planted. Must be an accidental seedling from a neighbor's plants. I walked closer, intrigued by the size and color of the fruit. It was the first day of my new life, a life without Kenneth, but with an unexpected opportunity waiting right outside my doorstep. The layoff came in late spring when the garden was already full of young greenery. The director of human resources, Patty Norton, called me into her office close to Friday evening. Patty was only a few years younger than me, and we had been with the company for about the same amount of time. Tears welled up in her eyes as she handed me the file folder. "Orson, I'm sorry," she said. "It's the board's decision. They're cutting the entire research department to focus on production." I nodded, accepting the folder. The rumors had been circulating for months. A large agricultural holding company had bought the company, and the new management had made no secret of the fact that they were planning to optimize the structure. Optimization is such a clean word for a dirty business. "The severance pay is for 6 months," Patty continued, avoiding my eyes. and full health insurance for a year. That's more than they usually offer. 37 years, I said quietly. I've worked here 37 years, Patty. She finally looked at me. Her gaze was the same as mine. Confusion, bitterness, fear of the unknown. They're downsizing my department, she confided. I'm leaving in 2 weeks. They say it's hard to find a new job at our age, but I've already sent out resumes to several companies. I silently packed up my office, pictures of Edith and Kenneth, a cactus that had stood on the windowsill for 7 years, several scientific journals, and a folder of my personal experiments. 37 years fit into one box. At home, I opened the bottle of whiskey Kenneth had left behind after his last visit and got really drunk for the first time in a long time. I woke up on the couch in the living room with a headache and a feeling of emptiness inside. It was almost noon on the clock. For the first time in decades, I had nowhere to rush, no need to check email, plan experiments, or write reports. I called Kenneth. I didn't know why. Maybe I wanted to hear words of encouragement. Maybe I was just in the habit of sharing important news with my family. He didn't pick up, so I left a short message. Hey, it's Dad. I got laid off today. Call me back when you can. He called back later that night. Dad? I got your message. What's up? I briefly explained the situation. Downsizing, severance pay, uncertain prospects. What are you going to do? He sounded impatient. I haven't decided yet. Maybe I'll take some time off and then look for work in other companies. At 64? He snorted. Be realistic, Dad. You're not going to get hired anywhere. You need to think of ways to cut costs. Sell the house and move to a smaller apartment or a nursing home. At least they include health care. I'm not going to sell the house, I said firmly, much less move to a nursing home. I'm perfectly fine. Of course you're fine. He sounded sarcastic now. Unemployed at 64, with a mortgage and a meager pension. That's brilliant. I don't have a mortgage, Kenneth. I paid it off in full 5 years ago. You did? He seemed surprised. Well, that's something. But still, the house is old, needs constant repairs, utility bills, property taxes. You can't afford all that on a pension. I'll take care of it, I said, feeling irritated. Don't worry. I'm not worried. You are, Kenneth said. And you know what the most frustrating part is? I told you to invest in Techno Future 10 years ago when it was worth a penny. You could be a millionaire now. But no. You preferred to keep the money under your mattress and grow your own damn tomatoes. I took a deep breath, trying to contain my anger. I lived my life the way I thought was right, Kenneth, and I don't regret it. Of course you do. His chuckle was like a bark. Tell that to your empty refrigerator in a couple months. We talked for a few more minutes, but the conversation was essentially over. Kenneth kept pushing to sell the house. I kept refusing. He kept getting angrier and angrier, and I kept getting more and more withdrawn. Okay, I gotta go, he finally said. I have a client meeting. Think about what I said, okay? And let me know if you decide to sell. I'll help you find a good realtor. I hung up the phone and sat in my chair for a long time, looking out the window at my garden. The lilacs that Edith and I had planted the first year after we bought the house were now in full bloom. How could I sell this house? Every corner here held memories of our lives, of the moment we brought Kenneth's newborn, of Sunday lunches in the garden, of Edith's last days. 3 days later, Kenneth arrived unexpectedly. No warning, just turned up on the doorstep with a small traveling bag. I thought I'd pay you a visit, he said as he entered the house, to see how you were doing. I was surprised and a little touched by his concern. Maybe I'd misunderstood his tone on the phone. Maybe he was really worried. The first evening went relatively peacefully. We ordered pizza, watched a baseball game on TV, and discussed the latest news. Kenneth talked about his new project at the company, his vacation plans, and the girl he had recently started dating. I listened, asked questions, tried to be interested. There was a hope inside that maybe my unemployment would be an opportunity to establish a relationship with my son. In the morning at breakfast, Kenneth opened his laptop and turned the screen toward me. Look, I've found several apartment options for rent in New Abizria, all close to the center, with good infrastructure, and the prices are reasonable. I pushed my plate of uneaten cereal away. Kenneth, I already told you I'm not selling the house. Dad, be reasonable. He leaned forward. Your savings aren't infinite. How long can you last without a job? A year, two, and then what? I'll get a job, I answered. Maybe not with a corporation, but I'll find something. I could consult on small farms or teach at a local college. Kenneth rolled his eyes. Counseling, teaching. It's pennies, Dad. Barely enough to eat, let alone keep house. I can handle it, I insisted. I always have. Yeah, sure. He slammed the laptop shut. But you used to have a steady job. Now you're an unemployed retiree with outdated skills. His words hurt me, but I tried to remain calm. My knowledge and experience are not obsolete, Kenneth. I read scientific journals, I keep up with new developments, and I have my own research. Oh yes, your precious experiments. He waved his hand toward the garden. Which are worthless and worthless. You're a loser, Dad. All your life you've worked for a pittance when you could have achieved more. I felt the blood rush to my face. What's more to you, Kenneth? More money, more status. For me, more is creating something useful, helping people, living in alignment with my values. What good are your values if you can't give yourself a decent old age? He got up from the table. You know what? Do whatever you want. I was trying to help, but if you'd rather cling to this old house and your illusions, be my guest. Just don't call me for money when you run out of savings. I've never asked you for money, I said quietly. And thank God for that, he snapped. Because a poor father like you is a disgrace. I can't even tell my co-workers what you've been doing was doing. There was a heavy silence. I looked at my son and didn't recognize him. Where had gone that inquisitive boy who used to come to me with questions about why the sky was blue and how trees grow? When did this cold, calculating creature for whom human value is measured only by the numbers in a bank account grow up? I think you'd better leave, I finally said. Tonight. I'd love to. Kenneth went upstairs to pack. Half an hour later, he came down with his bag and headed for the door. He stopped at the threshold and turned to me. You know, Dad, he said with a sudden sadness in his voice, I always hoped you'd come to your senses, that you'd realize how important it is to be successful, to be wealthy. I wanted to be proud of you. And I always hoped you'd realize that there are more important things in life than money, I replied. That real success wasn't about the size of the bill, but about who you were as a person. Kenneth shook his head. It's easy to philosophize about high things when you have nothing material to boast about. He walked out and I stood in the doorway, watching his rental car drive down the street. As it disappeared around the corner, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if the heavy weight I had been carrying for years had suddenly disappeared. I spent the rest of the day in the garden, weeding beds and tying up young tomato shoots. Working with the earth always calmed me down, helped me to put my thoughts in order. The sun was blazing, and I could feel the sweat running down my back, but I didn't stop. Physical fatigue was the best cure for my heartache. Toward evening, I noticed a strange bush by the far fence. It didn't look like any of the tomato varieties I'd grown this year. The leaves were larger, the stem thicker, and the fruit, though still green, promised to grow much larger than usual. I stepped closer, intrigued. Perhaps it was an accidental seedling from last year's plants, or a seed brought in by birds. I gingerly felt one of the fruits. It was firm, with a smooth skin and no visible defects. I decided to leave the bush and see what would grow out of it. The next morning I woke up with a clear head and an unexpected sense of freedom. For the first time in decades, I had complete control over my time. I didn't have to rush to work, report to management, or follow corporate rules. I could fully devote myself to what I had always loved most, my experiments with plants. After breakfast, I went to check out the mysterious tomato bush. It seemed to have grown even more overnight, and the fruit was beginning to take on a slight reddish hue. I decided to write down all my observations as I did at work. I took out a notebook and made initial notes on the size, color, and texture of the leaves and fruit. Over the next few days, I fully immersed myself in tending the garden. I trimmed the hedges, weeded the beds, installed supports for the climbing plants. From time to time, I checked on the strange tomato bush, which was growing at an astonishing rate. After a week, the fruits began to turn red, and their size was already twice, if not 3 times larger than a normal tomato. One evening, the phone rang. I hoped it was Kenneth deciding to apologize, but it was Patty Norton, a former colleague from HR. Orson? It's Patty. I just wanted to see how you were doing. We talked for almost an hour. Patty was fired too, just like she predicted. She told me that some former co-workers were having dinner the following Friday and invited me to join her. I agreed, suddenly realizing how little human contact I'd had in recent weeks. You know, Patty said before we said goodbye, I thought I'd be depressed after being fired, but in a strange way I feel liberated. It's like new opportunities have opened up. I understand, I replied. I feel the same way. After talking to Patty, I went out into the garden. It was already dark, but the full moon illuminated the paths between the beds. I headed toward a mysterious tomato bush. Its fruit seemed almost unnaturally large in the moonlight. I picked one. It barely fit in the palm of my hand. I brought it into the house and cut it open. The flesh was bright red, juicy, with no seeds in the center. I cut off a small piece, tasted it, and froze with amazement. The flavor was incredible, rich, sweet, with a slight sourness and some unusual notes I couldn't identify. It was the best tomato I had ever tasted. The next day I picked a few more from the mystery bush and took one to Martha Greenwood, my neighbor, who was a well-known cook in the area. "My goodness, Orson," she exclaimed as she cut the tomato open. "That's the biggest tomato I've ever seen. Where did you get it?" "I grew it in my garden," I replied proudly. "It's a new variety." Martha took a bite and closed her eyes in pleasure. "It's incredible. Such a rich flavor. You should definitely collect the seeds." Her words made me think. Seeds. If I could grow more tomatoes like this, maybe even improve their properties. After all, I had a degree in agronomic engineering and decades of experience in developing new hybrids. I returned home and scrutinized the remaining fruits. To my surprise, they really didn't contain the usual seeds. Instead, in the center of each tomato was a small number of small, almost transparent seeds, unlike any variety I knew. After carefully collecting the seeds, I placed them in paper bags and signed the date. Then I took a shovel and went to the far corner of the garden, where I had a small greenhouse that I had hardly used in recent years. It was time to clean it up. I spent the next few days preparing the greenhouse. I washed the glass, repaired the wooden frames, replaced the old watering system. Then I prepared the soil. I mixed garden soil with compost, added some sand for drainage and mineral fertilizers according to my own recipe, which I developed in my youth. When everything was ready, I planted the collected seeds in small containers and set the optimal watering and lighting regime. Now I just had to wait and watch. At the same time, I began to keep a detailed journal of observations. I recorded everything: temperature, humidity, soil composition, plant growth rate. I applied all the knowledge and skills accumulated over decades of work in the research department. The first sprouts appeared in 3 days, incredibly fast for tomatoes. The young plants grew literally before my eyes, each day adding a few centimeters. Their leaves were larger and darker than usual, their stems thicker and stronger. 2 weeks later, I decided to try to grow other vegetables using the technology I had begun to develop based on my observations of the unusual tomatoes. I prepared beds for carrots, beets, eggplants, and sweet peppers. Each crop was planted with specific soil and irrigation modifications based on my theories. Every morning I woke up eagerly, rushing to the greenhouse to test my experiments. Every evening I would stay up late analyzing data and planning my next steps. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive, truly engaged. One day, while going through my notes, I came across an old article in a scientific journal about genetic mutations in vegetable crops. The author, a biology professor from UCLA, described cases of spontaneous mutations resulting in significant increases in fruit size and changes in flavor. The article gave me the idea to conduct more systematic experiments. I decided to apply my knowledge as an agricultural engineer to create optimal conditions for the development and consolidation of beneficial mutations. I developed a special system of soil mixtures with different mineral composition, experimented with watering and lighting regimes, even created a simple system of microclimate control in the greenhouse. The results exceeded all expectations. The vegetables grew incredibly fast, reached impressive sizes, and had improved flavor. Carrots grew 30 centimeters long and as thick as my hand, yet still tender and sweet. Eggplants reached the size of a small melon while maintaining the perfect texture. I began taking pictures of my progress and keeping even more detailed notes. In my head, I was already forming a plan of further action. If I could achieve such results at home, what could I do with the right equipment and funding? In the evening, after another successful experiment with cucumbers that grew to the size of small zucchini, I was sitting on my back porch with a glass of wine watching the sunset. Suddenly, it hit me. I could patent my technology for growing giant vegetables and my tillage techniques. My knowledge and experience, which Kenneth had so contemptuously called obsolete, was actually my greatest asset. In the morning, I called my old friend Tom Parker, who worked in the patent office. We hadn't spoken in years, but he recognized my voice immediately. "Orson, what a surprise! How have you been?" I told him about my layoff and the new project I was working on. "Sounds interesting," Tom said after my explanation. "If you really have developed a new method of growing vegetables with improved characteristics, it could be very valuable. Agricultural patents are at a premium right now." We agreed to meet the following week to discuss the details and start the patenting process. I spent the weekend getting all the notes and photos in order, preparing materials for a presentation to Tom. On Monday, before the meeting, I decided to harvest some of the best samples of my giant vegetables. Walking into the greenhouse, I noticed that the tomatoes from the second generation of seeds were starting to ripen. They were even bigger than the first, with perfectly smooth skins of deep red color. I picked one, cut it open, and tasted it. The flavor was even better, rich, with the perfect balance of sweetness and sourness. But the most amazing thing was the aftertaste. It left a light, pleasant spiciness on my tongue that I had never encountered in tomatoes before. Looking at this magnificent fruit, I suddenly realized that I had found my new calling. What started as a chance discovery in the garden could turn into something more, a real business, the business of the rest of my life. In that moment, standing in the middle of the greenhouse with a giant tomato in my hands, I felt a surge of energy and determination. Kenneth was wrong. I was not a beggar father and a disgrace. I was an agricultural engineer with unique knowledge and experience, someone who could create something of real value. With that thought in mind, I picked a few of my best vegetable samples, stacked them neatly in a basket, and headed out to meet Tom, not realizing that this day would be the beginning of a whole new chapter in my life. Mornings at my new home on the hill begin with a ritual. I wake up at 6 sharp, drink a glass of water with lemon, put on my old work overalls, and head down to the experimental greenhouse. Although I now have an army of agronomists and lab technicians, I still do some of the experiments myself. Today is a special day, the 10-year anniversary of Quaid Grow. 10 years ago, I registered the company with only a patent for a unique technology for growing giant vegetables in a small greenhouse behind my old house. Who would have thought that in 10 years Quaid Grow would become an international corporation with a turnover of hundreds of millions of dollars? There's a new experimental eggplant hybrid waiting for me in the greenhouse. We've been working on it for 2 years now, trying to combine the size of our signature giant varieties with a higher antioxidant content. The last batch came out promising, but with a slight bitter flavor. I carefully cut one fruit, dark purple, glossy, the size of a small pumpkin. I weigh it, 3 kilograms, 400 grams. That's a good result. Back in the house, I shower and change into my suit. Today is a busy day. An interview for Forbes, a meeting with department heads, and in the evening, a gala reception in honor of the company's anniversary. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chang, has already prepared breakfast, scrambled eggs with greens and freshly squeezed orange juice. "Good morning, Mr. Quaid," she said, smiling. "Congratulations on the company anniversary." "Thank you, Lynn," I nod, sitting down at the table. "Don't forget that a journalist is coming in today. Please make sure the living room is stocked with everything you need." As I eat my breakfast, I look at the morning news on my tablet. Our company is mentioned in an article about innovation in agriculture. Quaid Grow continues to revolutionize organic food production, the article says. Orson Quaid's patented technology allows us to grow vegetables that are not only larger than conventional vegetables but also contain 30% more vitamins and minerals. Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life. 10 years ago, I was an unemployed 64-year-old agronomist who was called a beggar and a disgrace by my own son. Today, my fortune is estimated at hundreds of millions of dollars, and Times Magazine recently listed me as one of the 50 most influential people in agriculture. After breakfast, I walk out onto the terrace overlooking the city. My new home sits on a hill that overlooks all of New Iberia, from the business center to the suburbs. Somewhere up there, among the neat streets of the old neighborhood, stands my first house. I didn't sell it, despite moving. Now, a young family of farmers who are part of our program to support beginning agronomists live there. They pay a symbolic rent and grow vegetables according to our technology. At 9 o'clock, the Forbes reporter arrives, a young woman with a keen eye and a notebook scribbled in small handwriting. "Mr. Quaid," she begins after an exchange of pleasantries, "your story sounds like a modern fairy tale. At 64, you were unemployed, and at 74, you were on the Forbes list of millionaires. How did you manage to make such a breakthrough?" I'm smiling. It's a question I get asked all the time. "You know, Miss Harper, success rarely comes by accident. Behind my success story are decades of education, research, and experimentation. When I lost my job, all I had was knowledge and experience, plus a little luck in the form of a random mutation of tomatoes in my garden." "But many people have knowledge and experience but don't become millionaires," she insists. "Perhaps they lack persistence," I reply. "Or maybe they listen too much to those who say they can't succeed. You know, my own son thought I was a failure." The journalist perks up, sensing the sensation. "Really? And how does he feel about your success now?" "We don't talk," I answer dryly, signaling that the subject is closed. The interview goes on for another hour. We talk about the future of the company, about new projects, about the social responsibility of business. I talk about our program to help farmers in developing countries, about grants for young scientists, about cooperation with leading universities. After the journalist leaves, I go to the main office of Quaid Grow, a modern building made of glass and ecological materials in the center of the city. I am greeted in the lobby by Rachel Pym, the company's CEO and my right-hand woman. "Good morning, Orson," she smiles. The team is already gathered in the conference room. Rachel is one of the few people who knew me before. 10 years ago, she owned a small bakery and was my neighbor. When Quade Grow started expanding, I asked her to join the company. Her organizational skills and business acumen were exactly what we needed. She now manages all operations while I do research and strategic planning. The meeting is productive. We discuss quarterly results, exceeding expectations by 12%, plans to enter new markets, South America and Southeast Asia, and the launch of a new product line, seeds for home growing in confined spaces. Our development department has prepared a presentation on a new project, says Rachel, moving on to the next item on the agenda. They have created a hybrid that can grow in minimal light conditions. The young scientist talks enthusiastically about his research. I listen intently, asking questions, taking notes. Despite my age, I'm 74, I try to keep abreast of all scientific innovations and am personally involved in most research projects. After the meeting, Rachel and I have lunch in my office, discussing the details of the evening reception. Representatives from the major agribusinesses have confirmed attendance, she says, looking at the list on her tablet. The Minister of Agriculture will also be there. And of course, the press. That's great, I nod. We have something to show them. Rachel looks at me with a slight smile. Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this? 10 years ago, when you were just starting out, I wonder. 10 years ago, I just wanted to prove that I was still worth something, that my knowledge and experience had value, that I wasn't a deadbeat dad and a disgrace, as Kenneth used to say. Honestly, no, I answered. I was just doing what I know and love. Everything else came naturally. You know, Rachel puts the clipboard aside. I'm proud of you. A lot of people your age would have given up by now, and you've built an empire. With your help, I remind her. Without you, Quade Grow would be just a small research firm. She shakes her head. You're too modest. These are your designs, your patents. I just helped structure the business. After lunch, I return home to get ready for the evening reception. While I'm trying on my tuxedo, I think about how my life has changed. I used to wear a suit once a year to a corporate meeting at Agro Systems. Now I have a whole closet of designer suits for various events. The old house on Magnolia Avenue was cozy, but modest. 2 bedrooms, a small living room, old furniture that Edith and I bought when we were young. My current home is 500 square meters of modern architecture, with panoramic windows, a swimming pool, home theater, and of course, a state-of-the-art greenhouse equipped with the latest technology. I used to drive to work in an old Ford which I bought when Edith was still alive. Now I have 3 cars in my garage, including an electric Tesla of the latest model. But the main difference is not in material wealth. The main thing is the sense of freedom and opportunity. I can travel the world, studying rare plant varieties in South America or organic farming techniques in Japan. I can fund research that I think is important without corporate politics or budgetary constraints. I can help young scientists and farmers, giving them a chance I didn't have when I was their age. The reception takes place in the main exhibition hall at Quade Grow. The space is decorated with live plants and installations of our giant vegetables. In the center of the room is a mock-up of our new research station we are building in Peru to study high-altitude potato varieties. I give a welcome speech, thanking employees, partners, and investors. I talk about the future of the company, new projects, and our mission to create products that will help solve the problem of hunger and malnutrition around the world. After the official part, I talk to the guests, answer questions from journalists, and discuss potential cooperation with representatives of other companies. Several young scientists from the University of New Iberia come up to talk about their research and ask for advice. The evening is drawing to a close when Rachel approaches me with a concerned look on her face. "Orson, you have a phone call. They say it's urgent." I apologize to my conversation partners and retreat to a quiet corner of the room. "Who is it?" I ask, taking the phone. "I don't know," Rachel answers. The man didn't identify himself, but he said it was personal and very important. I put the phone to my ear. Orson Quaid speaking. At first I hear only breathing, then a quiet, almost unrecognizable voice. "Dad, it's me, Kenneth." I freeze. We haven't spoken in 10 years. The last time I saw my son was when he drove away from my old house, calling me a beggar father and a disgrace. "Kenneth," I say in a neutral tone, "to what do I owe the honor?" "Dad," his voice trembles as if he's crying. "I need to talk to you. In person. It's very important." "I'm at a corporate event right now," I answer dryly. "If you want to talk, make an appointment through my assistant." "Please," his voice is desperate. I'm in serious trouble. I made a mistake. Several mistakes, to be honest. Something inside of me is clenching. Despite all the hurt, that's still my son." "What's wrong?" "I can't talk about it over the phone," he replies. "Can I come to your place? Tomorrow?" I hesitate. Part of me wants to say no, to shut that door forever. But the other part, the part that still remembers the little boy who asked a million questions about the world around him, can't say no. "Okay," I finally say. "Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. My office is in the main Quaid Grow building." "Thank you," he exhales. "Thank you, Dad." When I return to the guests, Rachel gives me a questioning look, but I just shake my head. This conversation stays between Kenneth and me. The next morning, I arrive at the office earlier than usual. I check my mail, review reports, but my thoughts keep returning to my upcoming meeting with my son. What could have happened? Why did he decide to contact me now after 10 years of silence? At exactly 10 o'clock, the secretary announces Kenneth's arrival. I take a deep breath, preparing for the meeting. The man who enters my office bears little resemblance to the cocky financial analyst I remembered my son to be. Kenneth is now 44 years old, but he looks 50 slackened face, circles under his eyes, thinning hair with gray at the temples. His once expensive suit looks wrinkled and too loose, as if he's recently lost weight. "Hello, Kenneth," I say without getting up from the table. "Have a seat." He sits awkwardly in the chair across from me, looking around my spacious office with its panoramic view of the city. "Impressive," he says finally. "I saw your interview in Forbes and the Times article. You've accomplished a lot." "Thank you," I say neutrally. "Did you want to talk about something important?" Kenneth interlocks his fingers nervously. "Yes, I'm in trouble, Dad. Serious problems." He pauses as if gathering his strength, then the words come out of him in a flood. "I lost my job 6 months ago. I invested client money in a risky project without their knowledge. The project failed. The money's gone. I was fired, and now there's a lawsuit pending against me. Creditors are demanding immediate payment of all debts. Veronica filed for divorce and took the kids to her parents in Florida. I'm on the verge of bankruptcy." I listen silently, without interrupting. Only when he finishes his confession do I ask, "And what do you want from me?" "Help," he answers, tears welling up in his eyes. "A loan, an investment, a job, anything. I know I don't deserve it after everything I've said to you, but I apologize. I sincerely do. I was young and stupid and arrogant. I thought I knew everything about life, but I didn't really understand the basics." He wipes his eyes with the sleeve of his jacket. "Forgive me and come back into my life, please. I'm not that arrogant boy anymore. Life has taught me a lot." I stare at him, trying to see my son in this broken man. The Kenneth I remembered never admitted his mistakes, never apologized. But that Kenneth was also never desperate. "How much do you owe?" I ask him bluntly. He names an amount that makes my eyebrows raise slightly. It's a lot, but it's manageable for me right now. "And you think I'm just going to give you that money? After 10 years of silence? After all the things you've said to me?" I know how it looks, he replies, lowering his eyes. That I only showed up when you got rich. But I didn't. I've been following your progress all these years. Proud of you. It's just, pride kept me from calling. And now that everything's fallen apart, I realize that family is the only thing that really matters. There's something in his voice, in his face that makes me wonder. Maybe he's sincere. Perhaps life's hardships have really changed him. But then I notice the way he furtively looks around my office, assessing my surroundings, the way his gaze lingers on the expensive watch on my wrist, and my doubts dissipate. You know, Kenneth, I say calmly, 10 years ago, you told me that a poor father like me was a disgrace, that my life was a waste of time, that I should have aspired to more, money, status, success in your sense of the word. I pause. And now that I've achieved all that, you suddenly bring up family values? I'm sorry, but I don't believe in that kind of coincidence. Dad, it's not like that, he exclaims. Yes, I was a terrible son. Yes, I insulted you. I didn't appreciate you. But people change. I have changed. No, Kenneth. I shake my head. You haven't changed. You still see me as just a source of money. The only difference is that you used to despise me for not having it, and now you fawn over me for having it. That's not true, his voice trembles. I do regret the past. Give me a chance to prove it. I look at him for a long moment. In another situation, in another time, I might have believed it. Maybe would have given him that chance. But right now, looking into his eyes, all I see is a reflection of my money. I'm sorry you're in trouble, I finally say, but I can't help you. Not because I don't want to, but because it won't really help you. Money will solve your problems today, but it won't change who you are. Daddy, please, he's almost screaming. I'm on the edge. I have nowhere to go. I can work here at your company. I can do anything I want, even scrub floors. We don't have any open positions, I replied, getting up from the table. I'm afraid this meeting is over. No, wait. He jumps up too. I'm not just going to leave. You're my father, damn it. You have an obligation to me. The only obligation I had was to raise you to be a decent human being, I say quietly. And I seem to have failed at that. I press a button on the desk, summoning security. Please escort Mr. Quaid to the exit. Kenneth looks at me with rage and despair. You're going to regret this, he hisses. I swear you will. I don't answer, only smile slightly. It's not a smile of gloating, of triumph. More like a sad admission that some relationships can't be repaired, some wounds too deep to heal. As the guards take Kenneth away, I go to the window and look out at the city below. Somewhere out there, among the streets and houses, my son will be trying to pick up the pieces of his life. Part of me wishes him success in doing so, but the other part knows that until he changes his attitude toward life, toward money, toward people, nothing will change. The phone on the desk rings. It's Rachel. Is everything okay? She asks, worriedly. Security reported the incident. Yeah, everything's fine, I reply. Just a little misunderstanding. What's next on the schedule? A video conference with the partners from Japan in 20 minutes. Great, I say, walking back to my desk. I'll be ready. I open the conference folder, but my mind is still on Kenneth. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I should have given him a chance. But then I remember his eyes as he looked around my office. There was no remorse or love in them, just greed and calculation. And I realize I did the right thing. Sometimes the best way to help a man is not to help him. Sometimes he has to find his own way, even if that way is difficult and painful. Even if that person is your own son. After Kenneth left, I sat at my desk for a long time, unable to concentrate on the upcoming video conference. I could see his face in front of me, gaunt, with shadows under his eyes, but with the same familiar spark of calculation in his gaze. Even in despair, he was still the same Kenneth, evaluating, calculating the benefits. Mr. Quaid, the Japanese partners are on the line. The secretary's voice over the intercom brought me back to reality. I shook myself, gathered my scattered thoughts, and turned on the video link, putting a professional smile on my face. For an hour, I discussed seed supplies for the experimental greenhouses in Osaka, answered technical questions, and listened to reports of preliminary results. Outwardly, I was focused and attentive, but inside, a storm was raging. After finishing the conference, I canceled all remaining meetings and went home. I needed to be alone to sort out my feelings. At home, I changed into my old jeans and shirt, poured myself a whiskey, and went out onto the terrace. The day was warm, with a light breeze bringing the smells of blossoming trees from the garden below. I looked out at the city before me and thought about my son, whom I hadn't really known for years. My memory obligingly brought up images from the past. Here was Kenneth, a toddler, sitting on my shoulders during the Independence Day parade, enthusiastically waving a small flag. Here he is, already a high school student, proudly showing me his first science project, a working model of the solar system we spent a week putting together. Here's teenager Kenneth scoring the deciding goal in a high school game and searching my eyes for me in the stands to share in the triumph. When did everything change? When did that appraising coldness appear in his eyes? When did his respect change to contempt and then outright dislike? I remembered one of the last good times between us. Kenneth was 15, and we'd gone fishing, just the two of us, just like old times. Edith was sick at the time, but she insisted that we go on the traditional men's outing anyway. "The fish aren't biting today," Kenneth said, looking at the still float. "Fishing isn't all about fish," I replied, handing him a sandwich from the basket Edith had packed. "It's a time to think, to be quiet, to be alone with nature. And with each other," he added unexpectedly, and I saw in his eyes something long forgotten: warmth, openness, desire to be near. We sat on the lake shore until sunset, catching only 2 small bass, but it was one of the best days of my life. On the way home, Kenneth suddenly said, "You know, Dad, sometimes I act like a jerk. I'm sorry about that." "All teenagers act like jerks sometimes," I smiled. "It's part of growing up." "No, I'm serious," he insisted. "I say mean things about your job, about our house, but the truth is, I'm proud of you, that you're making a difference, helping people." I was so touched, I couldn't find the words. I just put my hand on his shoulder and squeezed it tight. He didn't drop it like he usually did lately. Maybe if Edith hadn't died that year, things would have been different. Maybe that moment of intimacy would have grown into something more, something real, but fate had it differently. Edith's illness progressed. Kenneth spent more and more time away from home, avoiding the heavy atmosphere of his dying mother and grief-stricken father. And then she was gone, and we were left alone, 2 strangers, bound only by blood and the memory of the woman we both loved. I tried to reach out to him, I really did. After the funeral, I suggested we go to the ocean together, just to be quiet, grieve, maybe talk. "I have final exams in a month," he cut me off. "I need to study if I want to get into a decent university." "Kenneth," I said then, "sometimes you have to stop and give yourself time to grieve. It's okay to grieve." "Grieve?" He looked at me puzzled. "What's the point? She's dead. No amount of tears will bring her back. We have to move on." In that moment, I thought he was just protecting himself, building a wall so he wouldn't feel the pain. I hoped time would heal everything. But time only deepened the chasm between us. When he left for college, I tried to keep in touch. I called every week, asking about school, new friends, plans. His answers got shorter and shorter, more and more formal. During my sophomore year, he started calling once a month, on Sundays, strictly between 3 and 4 in the afternoon. It was as if he were performing an unpleasant duty, crossing off another item on his to-do list. I visited him twice at Princeton. The first time was at the end of my freshman year, He showed me around the campus, introduced me to his roommate, even introduced me to the economics professor where he was a favorite student. But I could feel his tension, his desire to get this tour over with as soon as possible. In the restaurant where we dined, he kept looking around, as if he was afraid that someone he knew would see him with me, a simple agronomist in an inexpensive suit. The second visit, a year later, was even worse. Kenneth met me at the train station and immediately warned me, "I only have 2 hours, Dad." Then I had an important meeting with the supervisor of a research project. We spent those 2 hours in a cafe near the station. He talked about his successes, about his plans for an internship at a prestigious financial company, about his new girlfriend from a rich family. Not once did he ask how I was, how my work was, how life was in an empty house where every corner reminded him of Edith. After graduation, our contact became quite rare. He moved to New York, started a career as a financial analyst, married some banker's daughter. I found out about the wedding after the fact. He sent a short message and a picture of him and his bride standing in front of Central Park. I was not invited to the ceremony. It was a chamber event, just Veronica's closest friends and family, he explained when I called to congratulate. Only Veronica's closest friends and family, but not you, is what he actually said. I learned about the birth of my first grandchild from a text message too, a week after the event. I received the photo a month later. Attempts to meet the baby were met with endless excuses. Then the baby was sick. Then they had a trip planned. Then Kenneth had an important deal at work. I saw my grandson only twice in the first 5 years of his life. Both times were fleeting encounters as Kenneth and his family passed through New Iberia on their way to somewhere else. An hour in a coffee shop, strange smiles, a boy who looked at me warily, as if I were a stranger, which, in fact, I was to him. When my second grandson was born, I didn't try to establish a relationship anymore. I took it for granted that my family was not Kenneth, his wife, or my grandchildren whom I hardly knew. My family was myself, my memories of Edith, my garden, my work, and then I lost my job and Kenneth showed his true colors. "A penniless father like you is a disgrace." Those words are burned into my memory like a scorched iron. I don't know what hurt more, the contempt in his voice or the realization that I was just a function for my own son, a source of status that had dried up, rendered useless. Strangely, it was those cruel words that set me free. I stopped clinging to the illusion of family relationships, stopped hoping for reconciliation. And, ironically, that's when my new life began. The life that led to the creation of Quade Grow and everything I have now. The ringing of the phone snapped me out of my memories. It was Rachel. "Are you okay?" she asked without preamble. "You seemed upset when you left the office." "I'm fine," I replied. "It's just rough day." "Did it have anything to do with that man the guards took out?" I could hear the concern in her voice. I hesitated. Rachel knew Kenneth existed, but I'd never told her all the details of our relationship. "Yes," I finally said. "It was Kenneth, my son." "Oh," she paused. "Do you want to talk about it?" "Not over the phone," I answered. "Why don't we have dinner together? I could pick you up at 7. "Sure," she said. "I'll be waiting." At 7 in the evening, I drove up to Rachel's house, a modest but cozy bungalow in a quiet part of town. Despite my offers for a larger place, she preferred to stay here, in the house she'd bought before we met. We went to a small Italian restaurant that we both loved for its authentic cuisine and lack of pathos. They knew us as regulars and always kept a corner table, the quietest and most private. "So," Rachel said when we had ordered and were alone, "what happened with Kenneth?" I told her everything about the unexpected call the day before, about today's meeting, about Kenneth's request for financial help and my refusal. Rachel listened attentively, not interrupting, only nodding or frowning occasionally. "You did the right thing," she said when I was done. "His problems are a consequence of his own decisions. And from what you're telling me, His remorse is insincere. I know, I sighed. But I still feel, I don't know, guilt? Doubt? Maybe I should have given him a chance. A chance at what? She asked bluntly. To get your money, to use you and then disappear again. He's my son, Rachel, I said quietly. The only family I have left. Family isn't just blood, she covered my hand with hers. Family is the people who are there for you in times of need, who appreciate you not for what you have, but for who you are. I knew she was right. I remembered how 10 years ago, after getting fired and fighting with Kenneth, Rachel had been the one to support me. Back then, she was just a neighbor, the owner of the little bakery on the corner of the street. Every morning, I'd stop by for fresh bread and we'd swap news. When I lost my job, she noticed the change in my mood and invited me in for a cup of coffee. I hadn't planned to be frank, but there was something about her sincere engagement, her warm brown eyes that made me trust her. So I told her everything about the downsizing, about Kenneth's cruel words, about my fear of the future. You know what, she said then, maybe it's a blessing in disguise. Now you're free to do what you've always wanted to do. And what have I always wanted to do? I asked with a bitter chuckle. To experiment, to create, to cultivate, she answered simply. I can see your eyes light up when you talk about your garden, about new varieties, about all these agronomic things that I don't even understand. That day, she gave me not only support but also perspective, a new way of looking at my situation. And when I started to develop my technology for growing giant vegetables, she became my first taster, my first enthusiast, my first investor, investing her modest savings in the registration of Quaid Grow. What's on your mind? Rachel asked, bringing me back to the present. About how you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, I answered honestly. About how you're real. She was embarrassed, as she always was, by compliments. I just saw what was obvious, she shrugged. Your potential, your passion for the cause. And to be honest, your tomatoes really were amazing. We laughed, and the tension that had possessed me all day began to let go. We ate dinner, discussing work issues, weekend plans, and the new exhibit at the City Museum. In the car, on the way home, Rachel suddenly said, You know what I think about the Kenneth situation? I think you did the best you could as a father. You loved him, supported him, tried to guide him. What kind of man he's become is not your fault. It's his choice. Maybe, I said, but it still hurts to see your child turn into someone you can't respect. I understand, she nodded. Just don't let that pain define you, your life. You deserve better than that. At that moment, my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen, an unfamiliar number. Don't answer it, Rachel advised. It's too late for business calls. I followed her advice, but the phone continued to vibrate. A minute later, a message came through. Dad, it's me. Please call me back. It's urgent. Kenneth, I said to Rachel. I have no idea what else he wants. Ignore it, she said firmly. If he had a real emergency, he could call the appropriate services. I muted the sound on my phone and put it in my pocket. We spent the rest of the evening in pleasant conversation, never returning to the subject of Kenneth. But when I got home and checked my phone, there were 5 more missed calls and 3 more messages, each more desperate than the last. Dad, I really need your help. I don't know where else to turn. Please don't ignore me. I'm on edge. I decided not to respond. If I had believed in the sincerity of his remorse, maybe I would have called back. But after today's encounter, I was certain this was just another manipulation, another attempt to get my money. In the morning, I was in for a surprise. Kenneth was standing at the gate of my house as I left to go to work. How did you know where I lived? I asked, not hiding my annoyance. It's not that hard to find the address of a famous millionaire, he shrugged. Dad, we need to talk. I'm not leaving until you hear me out. I don't have time for this, I cut him off. And there's nothing to add to what I said yesterday. 5 minutes, he insisted. Just 5 minutes. Reluctantly, I agreed. We sat in the garden arbor. I didn't want to invite him into the house, as if that would violate some important boundary. Go ahead, I said, looking at my watch. I understand why you don't believe me, he began. After all I've said and done, or rather, I haven't done. I've been a terrible son. Arrogant, ungrateful, money-obsessed. I admit it. He seemed sincere, but I knew all too well his ability to play the convincing game. I asked when he paused. And I'm not asking for money, he said. Not now. I'm asking for a chance to prove I've changed. Let me work for you, in any capacity, as a laborer, as a delivery boy. I want to show you that I can be useful, reliable, that I can earn your trust. I looked at him carefully, trying to see the truth behind the words. Part of me wanted to believe, wanted to see this man as my son, the little boy who used to hug me on the way home from school. Kenneth, I finally said, the problem isn't that you were a bad son. The problem is that you're not sincere now. You haven't changed. You still look at me and all you see is a wallet. It's just that now that wallet is fat enough to deserve your attention. That's not true, he exclaimed. I've really changed. Losing my job, getting divorced, it's made me reevaluate everything. And reevaluating led you straight to a successful millionaire father, I remarked sarcastically. What an amazing coincidence. Yes, I'm desperate, he admitted. Yes, I need help. But I want more than just money. I want to get back the relationship I ruined with my stupidity. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. I have to go to work. And my answer remains the same. No. In the days that followed, Kenneth began a real siege. He called the office, trying to get through the receptionist. He sent long emails apologizing and promises. He even sent a bouquet of flowers with a note that said, "Forgive me and give me a chance." I instructed security to keep him out of the company building and to forward all his calls and emails to spam. But he was persistent. One day he showed up at a charity event organized by Quaidgrow. Somehow he'd gotten an invitation. I spotted him in the crowd of guests and asked security to escort him out. He didn't resist, but on the way out he shouted, "I won't give up, Dad. I will prove to you that I am worthy to be your son." This scene attracted the attention of journalists, and the next day a small article appeared in the local newspaper. Family drama in the Quaidgrow empire. Loser son versus millionaire father. Fortunately, the story didn't get much publicity. The public was more interested in our scientific developments than in the founder's personal life. But Kenneth didn't back down. He started showing up at the gate of my house every morning, just standing there looking out the windows, sometimes bringing coffee and donuts like we were going to a family breakfast. I ignored him by driving out the back gate. After a week of these vigils, I filed a harassment complaint with the police, and he was banned from my house. Then he changed tactics. He started writing traditional letters to me, sending them by post. Long, emotional messages full of memories of childhood, of Edith, of good times. He wrote that he realized his mistakes, that he regretted every harsh word, every missed moment, that he wanted to start over, to be a real family. I read those letters and felt a strange mix of emotions, hurt, longing, distrust, disappointment. Part of me still loved him, still saw him as my boy. But the other part, the more rational part, remembered the cold calculation in his eyes as he appraised my office, my watch, my suit. After a particularly emotional letter, I called Rachel late that night. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "Maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe he really has changed." "You're not being cruel," she replied firmly. "You're protecting yourself from a man who hurt you and will probably do it again. It's not cruelty, it's self-preservation. But if he's sincere, if he really wants to repair the relationship, then he'll find a way to prove it," she said. "Not with money, not with pretty words, but with actions, real changes in his life." Her words made me feel better about my decision. I didn't answer the letter. I didn't answer the next one either. A week later, Kenneth showed up at the main entrance to the Quaid Grow office with a sign that read, "I'm sorry, Dad." He stood there all day, attracting the attention of employees and passers-by. I watched him from my office window, feeling a growing irritation. This was no longer a search for reconciliation, but a public spectacle designed to elicit sympathy and possibly pressure me into public opinion. In the evening, as I left the building, he was still there, drenched in the rain, but holding the same placard. "Go away, Kenneth," I said as I walked past. "It won't help." "I'll be here every day," he said stubbornly. "Until you listen to me, you won't believe me." "I've already listened," I replied. "And I didn't believe it. This circus you're putting on only confirms my doubts." His face contorted with anger, the mask of remorse slipping for a moment. "You stubborn old man," he shouted. "You think your money makes you better than me? You think you can just cut me out of your life?" "No, Kenneth," I said calmly. "You're the one who cut me out of your life years ago. I just finally accepted it." With those words, I got in my car and drove away, leaving him standing in the rain with a soggy poster in his hands. After 2 weeks of Kenneth's constant calls, emails, and appearances outside the office, I realized that the situation needed a final resolution. His persistence had become an obsession, and his public displays were beginning to damage the company's reputation. Several business partners had already hinted that the family drama was causing investor concern. In the morning, I called Rachel into my office. "I need some advice," I said as she entered. "How do I finally resolve the Kenneth problem?" Rachel thought for a moment, tapping her pencil on her notepad. "Legal measures have already been taken, but they're ineffective. He's smart enough to balance the law. Maybe we should try direct communication. A letter where you clearly explain your position and the consequences of his future actions." "You think that would work?" I was skeptical. "He wouldn't listen to me in person. He ignored the restraining order." "It's not about him. It's about you," she interrupted gently. "You need to put a stop to this, for your own peace of mind. Make your thoughts and feelings clear, leaving no room for manipulation and misunderstanding." I considered her words. Maybe she's right. Perhaps I do need to express everything that has accumulated over the years in order to move on my own. All day long, I mentally composed this letter, choosing words, formulating thoughts. In the evening, when I got home, I sat down at the desk in my study and began to write. "Kenneth, after much deliberation, I have decided to write you this letter. Not to reopen a dialogue, but to finally clarify my position and ask you to cease all attempts at contact. In recent weeks, you have shown a persistence bordering on stalking. You have called, written, shown up at my home and office, and organized public demonstrations, all under the pretense of wanting to repair our relationship. But let's be honest, our relationship didn't break down yesterday. It happened years ago, gradually, for many reasons, and the responsibility for that lies with both of us. I may not have been the perfect father. Maybe I worked too hard, didn't show enough emotion, didn't always understand your needs and aspirations. But you, Kenneth, made a conscious choice to distance yourself from me, especially when my financial circumstances no longer met your expectations. You made it clear that you were ashamed of me, my job, my lifestyle. A pauper father like you is a disgrace. Those are words I will never forget. Now that my situation has changed, you suddenly remember kinship. You talk about remorse, about wanting to mend relationships, about family values. But I see in your eyes what I've always seen: calculation. You look at me, and you see me not as a father, but as a source of money, influence, opportunity. I can't and won't build a relationship on that basis. Real family ties are based on love, respect, acceptance of each other as we are, in wealth and in poverty, in success and in failure. You and I don't have that, and I'm afraid we never will. So I ask you to stop all attempts at contact. Don't call, don't write, don't come to my home or office. I have already filed a formal harassment complaint, and if you continue, I will have to take more serious legal steps. As for financial assistance, my answer remains the same. I will not give you money, offer you a job, or otherwise support you financially. Not because I am cruel or vindictive, but because I am sure it will not solve your real problems. Your difficulties are a consequence of your own decisions and values, and until those values change, no amount of money will bring you happiness or stability. I wish you to find your path. I sincerely hope you can reevaluate your life, your priorities, and build something real, something you can be proud of. Orson Quaid. I reread the letter several times, making edits, removing unnecessary emotion, adding clarity. Then I printed it out, signed it, and sealed it in an envelope. Tomorrow, I'll send it by courier. I want to make sure it reaches its destination. Putting the envelope aside, I went to the window. It was snowing lightly outside, the first of the year. White flakes were slowly falling on the trees in the garden, on the roofs of the neighboring houses, on the paths. I looked at this peaceful sight and felt strangely relieved. It was as if the heavy weight I had been carrying all these years began to melt away like snowflakes on a warm palm. The next day, I sent the letter and decided to turn my full attention to work. Quaid Grow had several important projects in the pipeline, but one in particular was occupying my thoughts, a program to support young farmers. The idea was born a few months ago when I met Adrian Murphy, a 22-year-old agricultural college graduate. He had applied to Quaid Grow for an internship, but there was such a passion for farming in his letter, such interesting ideas for sustainable agriculture, that I invited him to meet me in person. "Mr. Quaid," he said then, sitting across from me with a glint of enthusiasm in his eyes, "I know I can change the world through agriculture, but I have no land, no equipment, no capital, just knowledge, passion, and a willingness to work 24 hours a day." His words reminded me of myself as a young man. The same belief in the power of farming, the same desire to create something meaningful. "What if you had land?" I asked, "and basic equipment? What would you do?" Without hesitation, he unfolded a whole plan in front of me. An organic farm with an innovative irrigation system that utilizes rainwater, integrated crop and livestock production, partnering with local restaurants to shorten the supply chain. That same day, the idea for the Quaid Grow Incubator was born, a program that would provide young farmers with land, equipment, seeds, and mentoring support to launch their own projects. We started with my old house and the lot behind it. Adrian was the first participant in the program, moving there with his fiancée. Now, 3 months later, we were ready to expand. I had purchased 3 more parcels of land in different parts of the country and developed a full educational program with courses in agronomy, business planning, and sustainability. Today was the day to approve the budget and launch plan for next year. The incubator meeting dragged on into the evening. We discussed the criteria for selecting participants, the structure of the educational program, and the mentoring system. I insisted on maintaining the non-profit nature of the project despite the significant investment. "We are not looking for a financial return," I explained to the CFO. "We are investing in the future of agriculture, in people who share our vision and values." After the meeting, Rachel approached me. "Did you send the email to Kenneth?" "Yes, this morning," I nodded. "I hope that puts an end to it. How are you feeling?" "Strange," I admitted. "On the one hand, there's regret that things turned out this way. On the other, I'm relieved, like I've finally accepted reality and can move on." "Move on where?" she asked with a slight smile. "Peru," I answered, smiling too. "Remember when we discussed the trip to study high-altitude potato varieties? I booked tickets for next month. Are you coming with me?" "Sure," she touched my hand lightly. I won't miss the opportunity to see the legendary Inca terraced fields. I saw something in her eyes that I'd never seen in Kenneth's, a genuine interest, not in my money or status, but in what was really important to me, in my work, my ideas, my values. In that moment, I realized that we had long been more than just a business or friendly relationship. Something deeper, more personal connected us, though neither of us had dared to admit it yet. "Rachel," I said suddenly, "maybe after Peru we could go to the Galapagos Islands. I've always wanted to see the unique flora of that place." "I'd love to," she replied, and her smile lit up the whole place. A month passed. There was no word from Kenneth. No calls, no letters, no appearances outside the office. I hoped my letter had reached its destination, and he had finally realized the futility of his attempts. Rachel and I were up to our necks preparing for our trip to Peru. We had an itinerary to coordinate, meetings with local farmers, visits to research stations. In addition, the launch of the Quaid Grow incubator required constant attention. We were selecting the first participants, preparing training materials, and setting up the sites. We decided to spend the evening before we left at my house discussing the final details of the trip. Rachel brought a homemade pie. In her spare time from running a multi-million-dollar company, she still loved to bake. "I can't believe we'll be in Lima tomorrow," she said, pouring tea. "I've dreamed of seeing Machu Picchu for years." "We'll definitely visit it after the business part of the trip," I promised. "I've always wanted to visit it too. You know, as a child, I read books about ancient civilizations. Incas, Mayans, Aztecs. Their agricultural technologies were incredibly advanced for their time. We talked about our upcoming trip, about new projects, about future plans. At one point, Rachel asked, "Have you ever thought about retiring? Hand over the running of the company and just enjoy life?" I wondered. "Sometimes I do. But what would I do in retirement? Sit in a rocking chair? Play golf?" I smiled. "My work is my life, my passion. Especially now that I can do what I really think is important without looking at corporate rules or budget constraints." "I understand," she nodded. "I was just thinking, we're not getting any younger. Maybe we should spend more time on our personal lives." "Personal life?" I heard a note of uncertainty in her voice that was so uncharacteristic of the confident Rachel. I looked at her in the light of the desk lamp. Her face seemed especially beautiful, with the slight wrinkles in the corners of her eyes that appeared when she smiled. "Rachel," I said, gathering my courage, "I've been meaning to ask you, this trip to Peru, do you see it as a business trip or?" She raised an eyebrow. "Or as something more?" I felt myself blush like a teenager on a first date. "Because this is more than just a work trip for me." She smiled and her eyes lit up with warmth. "For me too, Orson. So much more." I reached out and gently touched her palm. She didn't pull away, and our fingers intertwined in a silent acknowledgement of the feelings that had long grown between us. The moment was interrupted by the ringing of the phone. I wanted to ignore it, but it was my lawyer, Michael Burton, and he never just called, much less in the evening. "I'm sorry," I said to Rachel. "Need to take this." The conversation was short but intense. When I hung up, Rachel looked at me with concern. "Is something wrong?" "Kenneth," I sighed. "He's hired a lawyer and he's trying to contest my will." "But how?" she wondered. "You're still alive." "Technically, he's not contesting the will itself, but he's filing a suit for undue influence. He claims that some unnamed person," I looked at her meaningfully, "is manipulating me into giving all my assets to a charitable foundation instead of the rightful heir." "That's absurd," Rachel said indignantly. "You made the decision to set up the foundation long before we were even close." "Of course it's absurd," I agreed. "Michael says the lawsuit has no chance, but it would create problems, take time, probably attract media attention." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the tension of the last few weeks returning. It seemed Kenneth would always be a shadow in my life, always finding a way to remind me of myself at the most inopportune moments. "You're upset," Rachel said. "I'm not upset. More like disappointed." I shook my head. "Disappointed," I shook my head. "Even now, all he thinks about is money. Not about fixing things, but about getting my fortune, at least after I'm dead." "And what are you going to do?" "What I have planned," I straightened up, shaking off the gloom. "Tomorrow we're going to Peru. We study potatoes, see Machu Picchu, enjoy life, and Michael will handle Kenneth and his lawyers." Rachel smiled, squeezing my hand. "Sounds like a great plan." We went back to discussing the trip, but thoughts of Kenneth never left my mind. Not because of the lawsuit, I didn't doubt its futility. It was the realization that my own son was so obsessed with money that he was willing to sue me before I was even dead. After Rachel left, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I tossed and turned in bed, going over the entire relationship between Kenneth and me, from his birth to now. Where had I gone wrong? What could I have done differently? Or was it not about me, but about him, his choices, his values? I was awakened this morning by Michael's phone call. "Orson, there's an update on Kenneth's lawsuit," he said without preamble. The judge refused to accept it. He said it was a blatantly speculative lawsuit with no legal basis. Good, I was relieved. "So the case is closed?" "Not quite," Michael sounded cautious. "Kenneth and his lawyer said they were going to appeal, and also they're threatening to go to the press, to tell the story about the hard-hearted millionaire father who refuses to help his son in his time of need." I sigh. It was always the same: manipulation, pressure, trying to make me feel guilty. "Let them go," I said firmly. "I'm not afraid of public opinion, and I won't change my mind because of threats." "Are you sure?" Michael knew me well enough to know that I didn't like publicity. It could affect the company's reputation. "Quaid Grow is judged on our products, our innovations, our social programs," I answered. "Not my personal life. And besides," I added with unexpected firmness, "I'm right. I should not give money to a person who sees me only as a wallet, even if that person is my son." After talking to Michael, I went to the airport where Rachel was waiting for me. Seeing her, elegant, lightly tanned from a recent trip to Arizona, with a warm smile meant just for me, I felt the anxieties of the last few days recede. "Ready for an adventure?" she asked as we took our seats in business class. "More than ready," I smiled back. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about your personal life, about making more time for it." "I?" She looked at me carefully. "And I decided that you're absolutely right. Life is too short to spend it on work alone, even if that work is your passion." "So you're thinking about retirement after all?" There was a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "Not a full pension," I clarified, "but about reducing working hours, about delegating some of the responsibilities, about more personal time. Time for us." I said the last words quietly, almost in a whisper, but she heard me. Her hand found mine, and in that touch was the promise of a future we could share. "By the way," I said as the plane began to taxi onto the runway, Michael called. "The judge dismissed Kenneth's lawsuit." "That's good," she nodded. "Now you can enjoy your trip in peace." "He's threatening to go to the press," I added, "to tell about the abusive father. What do you think of that?" I paused, staring out the window at the distant city. "You know, before, it would have upset me. I would have worried about what people would think, how it would affect the company, whether I should give in, give him money to avoid a scandal. And now? And now I realize that I have to live by my values," I answered, "even if someone doesn't understand or approve of them. My company, my money is the result of my labor, my decisions, my risks, and I have the right to dispose of it as I see fit. To give it to a man who sees it only as profit would be a betrayal of myself." Rachel smiled and squeezed my hand lightly. "I'm proud of you, Orson." The plane gained altitude and the city became a tiny mosaic below. I looked at the clouds passing outside the window and thought about the strange twists of fate. 10 years ago, I was an unemployed old man who was considered a failure by my own son. Today, I am a successful businessman, creator of a world-renowned company, a millionaire. But real wealth was not about money, status, or recognition. It was in the ability to live according to one's values without compromising them, even under pressure. A self-respect that didn't depend on the opinions of others. A relationship based on sincerity, not calculation. As the plane entered a dense layer of clouds hiding the ground from view, I turned to Rachel. You know what the ironic thing is? Kenneth was always chasing money, the measure of success, the meaning of life. I was just doing what I loved, following my passion. And in the end, the money came to me, not him. Because real success comes when you don't chase it, she said. When you just do what you do with love and honesty. A few hours later, we landed in Lima. The bright sunshine, the lush greenery, and the sounds of an unfamiliar language all made it feel like a new beginning. We got into a cab heading to the hotel, and I felt the phone in my pocket vibrate. A message from Michael. Kenneth was interviewed by the local newspaper. The headline was, "Quade's millionaire son fights for justice. Lots of lies, lots of drama. Don't worry, our lawyers are already preparing an official retraction." I showed the message to Rachel. "He's not giving up," she remarked with slight concern. "No," I agreed. "But you know what? It's not my problem anymore." I turned off my phone and tucked it away in my pocket. We had 2 weeks ahead of us in one of the most beautiful countries in the world, exploring unique agricultural techniques, meeting local farmers, visiting ancient Inca cities, and most importantly, time with each other. No work, no problems, no ghosts of the past. As the cab pulled up in front of the hotel, I looked at Rachel, her eyes shining with anticipation of adventure and a slight smile playing on her lips. In that moment, I realized that despite all the difficulties, all the disappointments, all the losses, life was good. And the best part of it was yet to begin. A month later, back in New Iberia, I received an envelope from Michael. Inside was a newspaper clipping a small note on the last page of the local paper. The court has finally dismissed Kenneth Quade's lawsuit against his father, millionaire Orson Quade. The judge called the claims frivolous and motivated solely by financial gain. Kenneth Quade is ordered to pay court costs. I grinned, folded the clipping and tossed it in the wastebasket. Then walked over to the window, where there was a pot with a small sprout, a special variety of tomato we'd brought back from the highlands of Peru. The first of a new line of Quade grow that could possibly help feed thousands of people in the arid regions of the world. True wealth, I thought as I watered the sprout, is not in the bank account. It's in what you leave behind.